Today, we're talking about taking risks. How do you know when it's the right time to roll the dice on a new idea, a new business venture, or even a career move? And what if the decision fails miserably? Well, you're in luck. Today's episode of the GrowWire podcast is dedicated to just that. We're talking to StarVest Partners co-founder Deborah Farrington, who's become quite the expert in taking risks.
You're listening to the GrowWire podcast, a place where you'll learn the ins and outs of growing a business, running a business, or even taking your big idea, career, or personal development to the next level. It's all possible. Our host, Jason Maynard, the SVP of Marketing at Oracle NetSuite and the Editor-in-Chief of GrowWire.com, will take you on an exploration of growth through candid conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in entrepreneurship, entertainment, business development, and more. Whatever your goal, we know you'll walk away with the right tools to help fuel your own journey of growth.
Really excited for today's show, but first I wanted to let you know that the GrowWire podcast is brought to you by Ring. If you don't know about Ring, well, you should. Their products are based on a simple principle. Use your existing home Wi-Fi network to create a ring of security around your home. By hooking up to your Wi-Fi, Ring products use the free Ring app. It's a video doorbell on your smartphone to alert you whenever someone approaches your door or comes in the range of your security cameras. You can even view an HD video stream of the person and speak to them using two-way audio communication. I actually have Ring at my house. And it's great. Somebody wants to deliver a package. You want to yell at the neighbor kids to get off your lawn. Maybe you don't want to do that. I do. Or really just kind of make sure that nothing is happening around your house that you don't want it to. So quite a valuable thing. Now, you can get your hands on a Ring Video Doorbell too at a discounted price. Just go to www.ring.com and use the promo code GROW20RING at checkout for $20 off the Video Doorbell 2, and do it fast. This promotion only lasts through July 31st. And hey, how about that LeBron news? If you've been living under a rock, you may have not heard, but LeBron is going to LA. He left Cleveland, and he's a Laker now. Ripple waves going through the NBA. Well, we've actually got something we don't normally do a lot on sports here on GrowWire, but we got a little exclusive. We have an interview with the man who made it happen. That's right, Magic Johnson. He talks about his motivational and business strategies, talks all sorts of things about how he transitioned off the court into becoming a business success. And you can read all about it and see the exclusive video on growwire.com. Now, let's talk with a woman who's never been afraid to risk it all, my friend, Deborah Farrington. She's co-founder, managing partner of StarVest Partners, a New York City-based VC firm. She invests in technology-enabled business services. She was an early focus on software as a service, data and analytics, internet marketing. StarVest is one of the largest women majority-owned VC firms in the U.S. and was founded in 1999. She serves on the boards of a number of companies. She's got a great background from investment banking, finance, went to Harvard, an amazing story. Debbie Farrington, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here.
Well, let's kick it off. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and give us some insight about what you do?
I am a venture capitalist, as you said, and our goal is to identify and invest in technology companies and help them grow by serving on the board and being advisors. We founded StarVest Partners in New York City in 1998, so this is our 20th anniversary year. We have $500 million under management in 3 funds. And at the time of our founding, we were 3 women partners and 1 man. That was just who happened to have the skills we needed at the time. It was not purposeful. But we are very proud that we're one of the largest majority female-owned VC funds. And our strategy, as you noted, since the beginning has been to invest in technology-enabled business services, basically software for businesses as opposed to consumers. We generally invest at the expansion stage in companies that have a product, referenceable customers, a business model that works, and generally $2 to $10 million of revenue. This is often B and C rounds, but when we do veer, we veer early for good reasons, as we did with NetSuite when we invested in the company when it had $100,000 in revenues, and it was one of our very early investments. I've been named to the Forbes Midas list of top 100 VCs multiple times. It was the top women on the list in 2008 and 2011. And this basically means to me that we need more women in the pipeline to go into venture capital. So that's one important thing.
Hear, hear. We're going to talk about some of the lessons you've learned over the 20 years in venture investing, but I want to get in a little bit to how you got here.
I grew up in New Jersey. I was the middle of three sisters, and there were three things that really were important to me growing up and who influenced what I became and who I am today. And I think the first was that my mother and father made it clear at an early age that we could do anything we set our minds to. And when my sisters and I would ask our father, "Don't you wish you had a boy?" he would always laugh and reply, "I wouldn't know what to do with a boy. I love having girls." So that made us feel just great and very empowered. And my dad worked at Lehman Brothers on Wall Street when I was growing up, so I had exposure to Wall Street from an early age. I remember he took me to his office when I was about 12 years old, and we visited the New York Stock Exchange. It was open outcry then, and people were yelling and standing knee-deep in paper because all the trades were confirmations on paper then. And I thought, gosh, that looks really like a lot of fun. I might want to do that someday. Of course, there were no women on the floor back then, but I never noticed. And it really did instill a curiosity and an interest in things financial that was probably unusual in the 1960s when I was growing up. And I think the third thing that is very important, and I'll come back to that later as well, is I'm a product of women's education. I went to a girls' high school, and I went to Smith College, which is the largest women's college then and now. So women were the leaders, and we were everything else. It was very empowering. I went to Smith in the 70s when the women's movement was just beginning. And so when I left, we had a sense of mission to be pioneers, and that's when I decided to go into finance when the field was just opening up to women. My parents had very high expectations. My father was an incredible optimist, a great raconteur, extremely humorous, and an amateur actor, very outgoing. So I learned at an early age that reaching out to people and humor were very important and effective interpersonal attributes to have. My mother was probably the kindest, most considerate person I've ever met, and she always said, "Remember, enthusiasm makes the difference." And that's one of my mantras to this day as well.
That's quite a start and an upbringing. How was it like entering the investment banking world in that time frame, being one of the few women in the business? I mean, how were you treated? Were you accepted? Was it harder than you thought or easier? Walk us through that, because that's fascinating.
You know, as I said, the women's movement was really just beginning, and Harvard Business School decided to reach out to women. So where did they come? The largest women's college. So they actually recruited it at Smith, and I thought, gee, if not me, then who? That's another important theme. I found myself often thinking that during my career. And so I applied to Harvard Business School and got in. I did the 2+2 program. I went to work at the Chase Manhattan Bank at first and really learned a lot of basic financial skills. Again, going into finance was something new. Finance was just opening up to women, and I got a great training there. So then went back to Harvard Business School, and at business school, a lot of people were thinking of going into investment banking or consulting. That was very much where the action was then, and investment banking was a pretty new field for women, and so I thought, this is a great place to start, to learn, and to be a pioneer. And I was also married at the time, and we thought we'd like to live and work abroad at some point, so I joined Merrill Lynch, which had a very strong international presence, probably the strongest among the investment banks at the time. And so by the time I was 30, I had worked and lived in New York, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. And it was great to have that international experience when I was young. You know, Asia, I was very lucky to be there during that period because it was just starting its growth phase. And investment banking in general was a great training ground, working with large clients and working with senior bankers. I really learned a lot at a young age. I learned how to interface with senior people. And so I think that was very important. At the early stages in investment banking, going back to your question, you know, what was tough about it, what was maybe not so tough, I felt that they generally welcomed women, and it was a terrific time to go into investment banking in the late 70s. 2 of my 4-person class, now they hire hundreds of people at a time, but then only 4 people were hired on my class. 2 of them were women. So I think Merrill, from an early point, had a pretty good emphasis on hiring women, on promoting women. And I was there for 10 years But as you go up farther, the pyramid narrows. So it became more difficult, and I got fantastic experience at Merrill. But after 10 years, I thought, time to do something else, time to be a larger fish in a smaller pond.
So, Debbie, tell us a little bit about what you learned during your time at Merrill Lynch and what were some of the lessons that have influenced you now.
The most important thing I learned at Merrill Lynch was not to be afraid to take on new challenges. In things that sometimes might seem like left turns, you can really learn a lot, and you'd be shocked at how much you can do. And I think as part of that, I learned to take calculated risks, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So by the time I was 30, I was ready to come back to New York, and very few people at Merrill Lynch in New York had lived and worked abroad. I also had the desire to run something. I thought that I might want to have my own business someday, and this was a key step in doing that. So I was offered the chance to establish and run a new division at Merrill Lynch International. It was planning and human resources, which combined annual and strategic planning and human resources. And the firm placed a strong really emphasis on linking pay and performance at the time. And because I was 30 at the time, I thought, well, if this doesn't work out, I can always do something else. And that was a key insight for me. I can take a risk and figure out how to recover if it doesn't work. So when I began this new job, it really was overwhelming. I had oversight of operations in 30 countries. It was a new function, HR. I'd never done it before. I had a lot of people working for me in 3 departments instead of just a few. And I had to manage up to the president and chairman as well as down to everybody else that worked for me. At first, I delegated too little, then I delegated too much, and then I figured it out. And one of the key things was that I worked closely with my boss, who was the president, to understand what he needed and expected. And it really was the best management training I ever had. I learned best processes then that I use to this day. And again, I'll come back to that key link between pay and performance. That was something that became very important at NetSuite. As lead director and chairman of the compensation committee after we went public, I think we did a very effective job at linking pay for performance and providing the appropriate incentives for people. And I learned all of that at that first big management job I had at Merrill Lynch.
So how do you make the decision to go from obviously one of the biggest investment banking firms on the street to starting and moving into venture capital? What was that thought process?
After a decade, it's time to try something new. That's generally the case. And at Merrill Lynch, I'd had 6 different jobs. And, the pyramid starts getting smaller as you move up, and it starts getting tougher, and people's elbows get sharper. So I decided that I wanted to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, so I could move faster, have more responsibility, and stand out more. So I decided to join a Hong Kong-based merchant bank that did both advisory and direct investing, and they had taken a deal away from me when I was at Merrill because they agreed to put their own capital into it, and I thought that was pretty cool. So the client went with them instead of Merrill. So I always wanted to do the next new thing, and I thought direct investing is it. And this was when U.S. investment banks were still prohibited from doing that. It was the late 80s. Glass-Steagall was still in place. And I became managing director for corporate finance. I moved back to Hong Kong and started doing direct investing in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Indonesia. And I worked with Chinese entrepreneurs. I learned a lot from them, and I thought, gosh, this is great. Someday I want to do what they're doing, building and running a company. So that was a very, very important lesson for me, and I moved into a company that did not have a brand name but had an important attribute. They could use their own capital. So after I was there for about 5 years, I joined some friends from Harvard Business School. And I did that because my last assignment at the merchant bank was to run a small public company that they controlled. And I approached my friends from Harvard Business School and I said, would you like to back me in this? And they said, no, but why don't you join us? We're about to start a new multi-strategy private equity firm and you can run it. So I agreed. I went, became CEO of that. We started with a desk and a phone and ended up raising $85 million to go invest in consumer products companies, which was our focus at the time, and I could not find a single one that was reasonably priced. So almost by chance, we invested in a staffing company in Texas, and we grew that by buying other smaller staffing companies. Now, this is a classic business services company if you think about it. We combined operations for the companies that we bought in order to save money. It's as much as PE firms do today, but that was pretty new at the time. So we grew the company from $17 million in revenues to $250 million and sold it for 30 times our money. I thought, this is great. This is what I want to do. So the Internet was just emerging as a business opportunity, and for the staffing company, we put some things in the Internet, sent financials back and forth, and that type of thing. So by actively working in that sector, I saw the possibilities for what the Internet could become for business services. And that was really when I made the leap to start my own firm.
Tell us about starting up on StarVest and how you built your team, how you raised your capital, because it's not easy to go start a venture capital firm and go raise all that money.
And that's right. And it was really exciting. And I remember when I took the plunge, I thought to myself, I'm ready now. I've worked at a couple of different companies. I've started things, always working for someone else. I've run divisions. I've learned best practices. I had a high need for independence, and I had known really for quite a while that I wanted to start my own firm. So I thought, now's the time, and if it doesn't work out, I'll figure out something else to do. I had learned by that time that I could certainly pick myself up, dust myself off, and keep on going if I tripped and fell. So I had been mentoring a young woman who was about 10 years younger than me, and she said, I'm interested in starting my fund, and she had a focus on digital media. And I remember at the time, which was 1998, digital media, that sounds a little bit narrow. Well, of course, she had the ability to see far out. So she became one of my co-founding partners. We ended up adding 2 more partners because we had this thesis that business services were going to go up on the Internet, which I had learned at my prior firm. And so we added 2 other partners. One was a guy who had an institutional background. He'd been CEO of Equitable Capital. He was good at raising money. And we added another woman who'd worked as a corporate VC investor at Olivetti. So we put together the skills we needed with the 4 of us, and we went about starting to raise $100 million was our goal. And at the time, print was still very important, so there was something called Gallant's Private Equity Journal. It was 400 pages. We shredded it into 4 pieces. Each of us took 100 names. We called every single name in the book, and we found an advisory firm who introduced us to our largest investor, the state of Pennsylvania, who is our largest investor today. And our strategy, which was very new at the time, really resonated with them, and we ended up raising $150 million and started out. You really couldn't do that today, but you could then. It was really a great time to start a business in venture capital. And then we built our team from there. We carefully added, I might add, associates and principal. Early on, we hired a CFO, which I have a very high respect for that function because I wanted us to run this like a really professional firm from the very beginning. And that CFO is our CFO today.
Well, and you made some early bets in your StarVest time that obviously paid off, and obviously one where we ended up connecting via the NetSuite investment. Take us back to that time, because the software industry was fairly well established, and there was this notion of delivering software as a service, but it was really not that popular, and a lot of people thought it was going to flame out, and there were a lot of failures with application service providers, and it wasn't an easy thing to get people excited about this new idea. So how did you end up making your early investments in this area, and what did you see way back then that literally nobody else saw?
You're right. It was not an easy concept at the time, and I remember when we were first looking at it, people had questions like, but what do you do when you're on an airplane? How do you access the information? And it was really interesting, and times have changed so much. But we had just started our firm in 1999, and I got a call. It was from a friend of mine, a section mate at Harvard Business School. And he said to me, I'm the CEO of this small California startup. It's called NetLedger, and, we're looking for some venture capital money. I know a lot of venture capitalists who are really smart, but Debbie, you're the only one that I know that I like. So that's another lesson. User interface is very, very important. And so he described this company. He said, we're going to put, accounting on the internet, and, oh, by the way, the other investor is Larry Ellison of Oracle. I thought, well, gosh, that sounds great. So I ended up meeting Evan Goldberg, and this will be of interest, at the top of the World Trade Center in 1999. And then I went out to visit Larry and Evan in California. I remember I spent the afternoon at Larry's house, and he told me this great story, and as only Larry can, he tells the story. Well, would you buy a car by buying the steering wheel from one person and the seats from the other and the engine from another, and then paying somebody to paste it all together? Well, that's what people do now with on-premise software. No, you want to get in the car, turn the key on, and have it all work together and have it already put together. That's what we're doing at NetLedger. And I thought, well, that sounds good to me. We started out trying to raise money in Silicon Valley. No one wanted to invest with us because they said, what? Software delivered to the internet? We're doing on-premise. That's what we're doing now. And so we tapped our East Coast brethren and several LPs from our firm, and they invested, and we never needed to seek out another venture capitalist after that, although many wanted to get in, as you can imagine.
If you've ever met a famous athlete at a corporate event or gotten an official autograph, chances are Steiner Sports made it happen. Here's Brandon Steiner.
We believe that there's magic in the moments that sports creates. We get customers closer to the game and help companies use the power of sports to grow their business. We've been in business 30 years, and we've had multiple systems to keep track of all the athletes and all of our customers. Multiple systems means multiple headaches. So we made the move to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite lets us replace all of our finance, inventory, and CRM functions with one convenient system. Now all the departments can see the same data. And if I have a question about our business, I can get the answer quickly.
This month, NetSuite is offering a free 60-minute business review with an expert in your industry to identify opportunities to turbocharge your growth. To get your free review, go to netsuite.com/Steiner. That's netsuite.com/Steiner. netsuite.com/Steiner.
So you started off, you were there really early in the heyday. Talk a little bit about some of the lessons you learned along the way. Maybe, early on, some of the things as you guys were just getting going.
The main thing I learned is that nothing is always all up and to the right. I would say that's the main thing. And the second thing is that transitions are critical. When we first started out, we really didn't know how to price this thing. And we were talking about pricing, and I remember Larry said, I think we should give it away. Let's try to get adoption going fast. And then we thought, well, wait a minute. We don't think that for business services, people really value what they don't pay for. Let's charge $4.95 a month. So that was the beginning of the pricing strategy at NetSuite. It obviously evolved quite a bit since then. And the second thing was another transition. I'd been an investor about a year, and then I got a call from the then CEO. And he said, Debbie, I've been fired. I said, what do you mean you've been fired? I'm on the board. That's impossible. He said, Larry called me and fired me. And so I got on the phone, and I said, wait a minute, we need to have a board meeting. So Larry and I got on the phone. I was the only independent at that point. And he said, well, you're probably right. I guess I should have called you. But now is the time to bring the founder back. Now is the time for Evan to be the CEO again. Remember what happened at Apple when they brought Steve Jobs back, the founder back? Well, that's what we need to do here. And so I said, okay. And then I thought to myself, not bad. One of the wealthiest men in the world is apologizing to me. I think I can go with that. And so Evan came back as CEO, which was really important.
You can't argue with him on that, can you? There's not a lot of wiggle room.
after 2 years of making great progress with the product, we had an intense technology focus at that time. We really felt now was the time to hire somebody to be laser focused on managing so that Evan could be laser focused on development and on the technology. And so it took a little while to persuade Evan, but we thought, the key was to say to him, you'll be so much happier just focusing on the product. And so we made the decision, and that was the point when we brought in Zach Nelson. The company had $3 million of revenues at the time, and when the time we sold it, when he was still CEO, it had $1 billion. So that was clearly the right decision.
How do you manage that with a founder? How do you convince a founder that they're good at maybe a lot of things, but you have to have someone else be their boss, if you will?
We just really sort of took a very soft-pedaled approach. We said, let's think about what's gone really well here, what you really like to do, and what's been really fun for you. So we reviewed that, and then we said, do you like doing this? Do you like firing people? No, he didn't. I said, well, why don't we get somebody else to do that? And he said, I think maybe you're right. So we were very, very careful. And what we did, we actually focused on people who'd been at Oracle, because Evan had been at Oracle, Larry had been at Oracle, and we thought, if we got somebody from Oracle, this would be, probably an easier transition. And we also thought, let's try to pick somebody who has a different background from Evan, and Zach had a marketing background. So it was really those two things. So we focused on finding somebody who was very complementary to the founder, and then someone that he respected, and also that he could learn from. And so I think that really was key, enabling him to do what he really liked best, and really having it be a true partnership as opposed to, he did work for Zach, but it was very much a partnership and enabled him to do what he did best. So I think that was really the key there. A little bit of self-interest goes a long way.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Well, talk a little bit more about some of the other transitions that you saw the team facing as they grew the business.
I'll talk about two. Number one was the decision that it was really the time to scale the business. And we had, it was just before we were going public, and we thought, now is the time to have a COO. We'd grown quickly, about to go public, and again, another transition was to convince Zach that now was the time to have Jim McGeever be the COO. Jim had been the CFO. He knew the product almost better than anyone else from a user perspective because he was a finance guy. So he often went out on sales calls, and so we made the decision that now was the time for Jim to be the COO and take care of really sales and services. And then another transition, again, another anecdote, which those who work for NetSuite now will find particularly amusing, is early on when Jim was the CFO, we were sitting here in New York. I think it was probably about 2004 or so. And we were looking at the business model, and I had one of my very smart LPs here who had built Merrill Lynch's wealth management business, and we were staring at the business model, and we noted that there was only about 3% allocated in terms of revenues on services, on helping the clients, on implementation. And he looked at it and said, I think that looks sort of small. And Jim said, well, what do you mean? This is supposed to be self-service. It's over the Internet. People can use it themselves. And we realized then that wasn't the case, that we really needed to have a services component. So I think that was another key point. And it also segues into probably the greatest challenge that I think that the team faced in building NetSuite.
Yeah, talk about that and some of the challenges about when you went public as well, because I think those are sort of intertwined in terms of how you deal with things like being a public company and stocks going up and down.
Right. They really are intertwined, and I'm glad you said that and actually used that phrase. We went public in December of 2007, and in retrospect, we were the last company to get out before the financial crisis. We priced the stock at 26, which was much higher than we thought we were going to price it. And by the end of the year, it was 46, had an incredible run-up. We were excited to go public. We knew it would be a challenge. We were going to have to adhere to the strictures of being a public company, reporting, so on and so forth, but we were ready. But I think you're probably never truly ready for the scrutiny that a public company has, and also with the vagaries of the stock price. So I think everybody may remember what happened in 2008 and 2009. The financial crisis hit, and on March 6, 2009, our stock was at 6. So it had gone from
$6,
yeah,
46 to 6,
from 46 to 6 in a period of a little over a year. And if you don't think that was a wake-up call, wow, nothing would be. So we faced the challenge of how do you keep people motivated when the stock is at 6 and their options are at 26 or higher? And then also, what do you do when growth has fallen to 9%? We were growing at 50% before we went public, and now financial crisis hit, we're down to 9%. What do we do? So we did two things. We really, I think, focused the team on thinking we're all in this together, and it was the only time in my career as a longtime chairman of public company compensation committees that we repriced options. But Google had done it, and we thought, if it's good enough for Google, we can do it too. So we repriced the options, and people had the choice of repricing them or not. Almost everybody repriced them. And so we enabled people to see the future and say, if and when the stock ever does go up, because in 2008 and 2009, everybody thought the world was ending, then people will be very much aligned with our shareholders. And then the second thing I remember in 2009, we're sitting there during a board meeting, and we're staring at the slides during the board meeting. And our growth had slowed to 9%, and it showed what percentage of our customer base had churned. And guess what? It was 2% a month. That equals 24% a year. And one of my fellow directors made the incredibly astute observation, if we cut that in half to 1% a month or 12% a year, we'll grow 12%. Eureka, 9% and 12% is over 20. And so we set about focusing on how to keep customers from churning, and that's when we really built out and placed a real emphasis on professional services, on customer success, on implementation, and on really ensuring that customers had what they needed to be successful. So I think that was the greatest challenge we ever faced, which was intertwined with going public.
And in 2008, 2009, there were a lot of companies just going out of business. Was that really kind of one of the biggest issues with the churn?
Yeah, well, I'd like to remind you that Bear Stearns went out of business and Lehman Brothers went out of business. So some of the largest entities in the country were going out of business, notwithstanding small tech companies. So I think that was a big part of the churn. We had a focus still on small businesses. They were going out of business left and right. So after that, we also shifted to a more balanced strategy. We focused on divisions of larger companies and also moved up market to the really mid-market and lower tier of the mid-market. So that did necessitate a change in strategy, as you say. It was a really interesting time and very challenging, but we made it through. And importantly, the team made it through together. And Jason, I knew you during all that time too. You were a star analyst, and it was really exciting, very exciting times, as you recall.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting period to see companies come out of that downturn and how they operated differently and how they changed their stripes. Well, when you think about not just the NetSuite time, but your other investments, what advice do you give entrepreneurs or even a business owner today when you sort of say, how do you deal with the things aren't always going to be up and to the right? What are the 2 or 3 things that they could take away and say, okay, I can apply that to whether I'm a small company today and I'm always going to be a small company, or someone who's really trying to scale and grow their business?
Be humble, get great advisors, ask for feedback, and listen to it. You will have understood the market opportunity. You've had the idea to start a business, hopefully figured out the strategy, the execution required, and the people that you need. Those are things that I think it almost goes without saying that a great entrepreneur or a business owner has to do just to start and to get into business. But I think that getting the people quotient right and having an accurate view of your own capabilities and when you need to bring in people to assist you is really, really critical. And then the other thing at Harvard Business School that they teach you in entrepreneurship class is don't run out of money. So that's critical. Be the master of your own destiny. If you don't think you can raise any more money, then cut the burn because you don't want someone else telling you what to do. At least certainly not right away. I think the other thing that I think is really important, set clear goals, let everybody know where you're going, and then pay them to make it happen, and don't pay them if it doesn't happen. I think, so those are some of the clear precepts that I would really give to any really entrepreneur and business owner.
I like that. No, and it's always hard in the transitions to when you're in the middle of it to look at yourself and evaluate what you're good at, what you're not good at, and having good people around you to help you through that is a key. So I have to ask you, what's next for Debbie Farrington? Where are you going next, and what are you doing now?
I like to think of things, as I said before, in sort of 10-year increments. I've had this firm for 20 years. It's been great. But I think for the next 10 years, I'm extremely interested in the challenge and the opportunity of digital transformation and of innovation. I think this is one of the key challenges facing American business today. And what I've decided is that over the next 10 years, I want to be a director of Fortune 500 companies that are facing this challenge. I recently joined the board last December of 2017, of NCR, which is a Fortune 500 company. Many people know them, cash machines, point-of-sale checkouts, et cetera, and they're actually doing self-checkouts at Walmart and Target now. But they're facing the challenge of making the transition from a hardware and services company more to a software company. And I think that this is a fascinating challenge. I'm also on the board of the McKinsey New Ventures Council, and that's one of the things we talk about a lot, and that McKinsey helps their major clients with. How do you embark upon digital transformation? I think this is critical to keeping American businesses competitive. I think it's critical to both saving jobs and really establishing more jobs in our country. And so this is the thing where I think I can make a big contribution in the next 10 years, and this is what I would like to do.
Since you're obviously helping many firms with some of this advice on digital transformation, maybe we can ask you, what are a couple things that maybe existing businesses that have been around for a while should look at as they face global competition or they face new, entrants in their market? What are some of the pieces of advice you give some of your companies in terms of how they manage this sort of inevitable transition?
You can't be afraid to cannibalize your own business. I think we've seen this in software. Some of the companies that haven't made the transition to the cloud, that are trying to defend their old turf, are ones that are not prospering. So I think figuring out a way to make that transition is critical. Another thing that is critical advice that we're giving people is figure out how to use the data that you have. I think most companies would be shocked at the amount of data that they have. Try to use that to provide critical insights for both yourself and your customers, and enable your customers to use that data. So using all of the great tools that are now available to us in terms of the cloud, gathering data, using data, which I think enables artificial intelligence and machine learning, really look at every aspect of your business and see how you can disrupt yourself before somebody else disrupts you. I think that's one of the main things. And then also make sure that you're constantly refreshing the management team with people that have new skills. If you're a hardware company, you got to look at yourself and figure out What is the role of software? Because there's got to be software. Your customers are buying that from someone else. Why not you? Have them buy it from you. So I think that's the kind of thing. Have a laser focus on your customer. What do they need? How much of what they need are you supplying? What else can you supply while taking advantage of your strengths and weaknesses? Just like a person, a company's got to look at what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, where can we compete? So that's the advice that I'm giving, and I'm really thinking a lot about what is the easiest way to do this, what are some of the processes that companies can put in place that will enable them to do this so that they can survive and prosper and grow and provide the benefits to their workers, to our economy, and to our country.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to give those words of advice to our audience. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your words of wisdom and your experience and things they should look out for in the future. So we thank you, Debbie, for your time, and we appreciate you joining us today. So thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity being part of NetSuite and growing it from $100,000 in revenues in 2000 to $1 billion in 2016, and then selling it to Oracle for $9.4 billion in 2016 was probably the thing I am most proudest of in my career, and I thank all of you for that.
Be humble, get great advisors, ask for feedback, and listen to it. We got some great advice from a woman who knows what she's talking about. Can't wait to talk with Deborah again soon. I also want to say thank you to everyone who made this podcast possible. Special thanks to everyone who worked on this episode: Deborah Farrington, Kendall Fisher, our production and editing team over at Lampstand, and of course our sponsors Ring and Steiner Sports. Adios, everybody.
You just listened to the Grow Wire podcast with host Jason Maynard. Make sure to tune in every week for another episode full of tips, tools, and strategies to take your personal and professional growth to the next level. Until next time.